There's a moment when the searching stops, when the endless quest for meaning, for purpose, for something to fill the aching void inside finally comes to rest. It's not dramatic, no lightning strikes or celestial choirs. It's quiet, like finding a door you've walked past 1,000 times, only to realize it was never locked. You've been seeking enlightenment in ashrams and answers in books, chasing peak experiences and profound realizations when the very thing you've been looking for has been sitting patiently within you all along. The mystics call it presence, the psychologists call it mindfulness. But what if it's something even simpler than that? What if coming home to yourself is the most natural thing in the world and you've simply forgotten how to stop running long enough to recognize where you already are? The journey inward isn't about finding yourself. It's about stopping the search that keeps you from recognizing who you've always been. We begin as pure consciousness, unmarked by the world's expectations. A baby doesn't wake up thinking, I am a successful person, or I am a failure. There's just awareness, just being. But somewhere along the way, we start collecting identities like souvenirs from a trip we never planned to take. First, we're the good child or the rebellious one, then the student, the achiever, the disappointment. Later, we become the professional, the parent, the spouse, the success story, or the cautionary tale. Each role comes with its own costume, its own script, its own way of moving through the world. We slip into these characters so completely that we forget we're wearing a mask. The teacher believes she must always have the answers. The strong one believes he cannot show vulnerability. The caretaker believes her worth depends on how much she can give. The successful one believes his value is tied to his achievements. Layer by layer, we wrap ourselves in these identities until we can no longer feel the breath of our original self underneath. We become so skilled at playing our parts that we forget there's a difference between the role and the one who plays it. The actor becomes lost in the character, forgetting that beyond the costume and the lines, there's something untouchable, something that remains whole no matter what story is being told. This forgetting isn't anyone's fault. It's simply how we learn to navigate a world that seems to demand we be somebody specific, somebody useful, somebody who fits into neat categories. Society needs doctors and teachers, parents and leaders, and so we shape ourselves to fill these molds. But in doing so, we often lose touch with the spacious awareness that existed before we learned to define ourselves by what we do, what we have, or what others think of us. The great forgetting happens so gradually that we don't even notice we're disappearing. One day, you look in the mirror and see only the titles, the accomplishments, the failures, the responsibilities. You see the story of your life, but you can't quite locate the storyteller. You know all about who you're supposed to be, but you've lost track of who you actually are beneath all the doing and becoming. It's about being willing to be surprised, to have your assumptions challenged, to discover that what you thought you knew was only a small piece of a much larger picture. The expert's mind is closed to new possibilities. It approaches each situation with preconceived notions, looking for confirmation of what it already believes. The beginner's mind is open, curious, willing to be taught by life itself. It doesn't need to have an opinion about everything or a solution to every problem. It can simply be present to what is, without immediately trying to categorize or control it. This not knowing is particularly powerful in relationships. When you think you know your partner, your children, your friends completely, you stop really seeing them. You interact with your mental image of them rather than with who they actually are in this moment. But when you approach the people in your life with beginner's mind, you discover that they're constantly changing, constantly revealing new aspects of themselves, constantly surprising you with their depth and complexity. The wisdom of not knowing is also essential for spiritual growth. The moment you think you've attained enlightenment, you've lost it. The moment you believe you understand what awakening is, you've fallen asleep again. The spiritual path is not about accumulating knowledge or achieving states. It's about becoming more comfortable with mystery, more at home in the unknown. This doesn't mean becoming passive or stopping the natural human impulse to learn and grow. It means holding your knowledge lightly, being willing to let go of what you think you know when life presents you with new information. It means staying curious rather than becoming dogmatic, staying open rather than becoming closed. The great teachers throughout history have embodied this not knowing. They've pointed to truths that can't be captured in words, yet to mysteries that can't be solved by thinking. They've invited us to step beyond the limitations of the rational mind and into the vast space of direct experience. In this space of not knowing, you discover that you don't need to have all the answers to live a meaningful life. You don't need to understand everything to love deeply. You don't need to figure out the meaning of existence to participate fully in it. You can live the questions rather than demanding answers, dance with uncertainty rather than insisting on control. This not knowing becomes a doorway to wonder. When you don't know how consciousness arises from matter, you can marvel at the miracle of your own awareness. When you don't know why beauty moves you so deeply, you can simply let it move you. When you don't know what happens after death, you can live more fully in the time you have. We are all walking each other home, though we rarely recognize it. In the grocery store, on the subway, in our families and communities, we're surrounded by fellow travelers on the same journey. We're all trying to figure out how to be human, how to love, how to face the inevitable losses that come with being alive. We're all struggling with the same basic questions. Who am I? Why am I here? How do I find peace in a world that often feels chaotic and painful? The recognition of our shared humanity changes everything. The person who irritates you in traffic is dealing with their own fears and insecurities. The difficult family member is carrying their own unhealed wounds. The stranger who seems so different from you is asking the same fundamental questions about meaning and purpose. When you really see this, competition gives way to compassion, judgment gives way to understanding. This doesn't mean everyone is at the same place on the journey. Some are just beginning to question who they are beneath their roles and identities. Others have been walking the spiritual path for decades. Some are dealing with fresh grief and loss. Others have made peace with impermanence, but regardless of where we are on the path, we're all heading toward the same destination, the recognition of our true nature, the return to love, the coming home to ourselves. The beautiful thing about recognizing that we're all walking each other home is that it removes the spiritual hierarchy that the ego loves to create. There's no enlightened person, an unenlightened person, no teacher and student, no one who has it all figured out, and one who's still confused. There are just fellow travelers, each offering what they have to give, each receiving what they need in the moment. Sometimes you're the one offering support, listening to a friend's pain, helping someone through a difficult time, sharing what you've learned from your own struggles. Sometimes you're the one receiving, accepting help when you're overwhelmed, learning from someone else's wisdom, allowing yourself to be vulnerable and cared for. The roles shift constantly, naturally, without anyone keeping score. This mutual support happens in ways both obvious and subtle. The stranger who smiles at you when you're having a hard day is walking you home. The friend who sits with you in silence when words aren't enough is walking you home. The person who challenges your assumptions and helps you grow is walking you home. Even the difficult relationships that push you to develop patience and compassion are walking you home. We're also walking each other home through our simple presence. When you're fully present with someone, not trying to fix or change them, just witnessing their experience with love and acceptance, you're offering them a profound gift. You're reminding them that they're not alone, that their struggles are seen and understood, that their very existence matters. This recognition transforms how you move through the world. You begin to see every interaction as an opportunity to serve, to love, to offer whatever small gift you have to give. You realize that you don't need to be a great teacher or healer to make a difference. You just need to be genuinely present, authentically yourself, willing to share your humanity with others. The path home isn't always easy. There are times when we get lost, when we forget who we are, when we're overwhelmed by the challenges of being human. But we don't walk alone. We're surrounded by companions, even when we can't see them. The love we offer comes back to us in unexpected ways. The comfort we provide creates a web of care that supports us all. So here we are at the end of our journey together, though endings are just another beginning in disguise. You came looking for the freedom of being nobody, and perhaps you've discovered that this freedom was never far away. It was waiting patiently in the spaces between your thoughts, in the pause between your breaths, in the stillness that exists even in the midst of great activity. The freedom of being nobody isn't about disappearing or becoming passive. It's about recognizing that the someone you thought you were, with all their problems and achievements, their history and plans, is like a wave on the ocean. The wave is real, but it's not separate from the ocean. You are that ocean, vast and unchanging, allowing all waves to rise and fall without being disturbed by any of them. This freedom comes not from adding something to yourself, but from subtracting, letting go of the stories that limit you, the identities that confine you, the beliefs that separate you from the love you truly are. When you stop trying to be somebody special, you discover the extraordinary ordinariness of your true nature. When you stop defending a false self, you find the authentic self that needs no defense. The practices we've explored, presence, love, letting go, service, aren't techniques to achieve some future state of enlightenment. They're ways of remembering what you've always known, of coming home to what you've never left. They're invitations to stop running from yourself and start embracing the magnificent, ordinary, temporary, eternal being you are. This doesn't mean your struggles will disappear or that life will become easy. You'll still face difficulties, still make mistakes, still experience loss and pain, but you'll meet these experiences from a different place, not as someone desperate to avoid suffering, but as consciousness itself, curious about what it's like to be human. The freedom of being nobody is available right now, in this moment, regardless of what's happening in your life. You don't need to wait until you're more spiritual, more successful, more anything. You just need to stop pretending you're someone you're not and start being who you've always been. Take a breath, feel your feet on the ground. Notice the awareness that's aware of these words, these thoughts, these sensations. That awareness is your true home. It's where you've always lived, though you may have forgotten the address. It's who you've always been, though you may have been playing other roles. We're all walking each other home, and the beautiful secret is that we're already there. We've always been there. We just forgot to notice. The freedom of being nobody is the freedom to remember this truth, to live from this recognition, to offer this gift to everyone we meet. So be nobody. Be the vast, loving awareness that you are. Be the space in which all experience happens. Be the peace that passes understanding. Be the love that needs no reason. Be the freedom that was never lost. The journey continues, but now you know the secret. You're not going anywhere. You're already home. This is the beginning of a profound homesickness, not for a place, but for a way of being. You start to sense that something essential has been misplaced, though you can't quite name what it is. There's a feeling of being a stranger in your own life, going through the motions of a script you don't remember writing. You're successful at being somebody, but you're failing at being nobody, and somehow that feels like the more important failure. The mind is a master storyteller, weaving narratives that make us feel solid, separate, and significant. It whispers constantly, "You are this, not that. You are better than them, worse than her. You are the one who remembers everything, the one who never gets it right, the one who always comes through." These stories feel so real, so important, that we base our entire lives around protecting and promoting this character we believe ourselves to be. But here's what the mind doesn't want you to know. The separate self is a magnificent fiction. It's not that you don't exist, you most certainly do. It's that you're not who you think you are. The person you've been defending, promoting, and worrying about is a collection of thoughts, memories, and learned behaviors. It's a role you've been playing for so long that you've forgotten you're playing it. When you were a child, you might have played house or cowboys and Indians. You could slip into character completely, feeling the emotions of the role, reacting as that character would react. But when the game was over, you didn't have trouble remembering who you really were. You knew the difference between playing and being. Somewhere along the way, we lost this ability to distinguish between the character and the consciousness that animates it. The separate self thrives on comparison. It needs to know where it stands in relation to others. Am I winning or losing? Am I ahead or behind? Am I worthy or unworthy? This constant measuring creates a perpetual state of anxiety because the separate self can never be secure. There's always someone smarter, more successful, more attractive, more spiritual. The ego's job is to make you feel special, but it can only do this by making others feel ordinary, which ultimately makes you feel isolated. This isolation is the ego's greatest trick. It convinces you that you're fundamentally alone in the world, that your struggles are unique, that no one could possibly understand what you're going through. It creates the illusion that you're a single wave trying to make it in a vast ocean, when in reality you are the ocean itself, expressing as a wave. The separate self also lives in a constant state of becoming. It's always trying to get somewhere else, to be someone else, to have something else. It says, I'll be happy when I get the promotion, when I find the right person, when I lose the weight, when I figure it all out. But that moment of arrival never comes, because the separate self is built on the foundation of not being enough as you are right now. This isn't to say that goals and desires are wrong. They're part of the human experience. But when you believe that your worth depends on achieving them, when you think that your happiness lives on the other side of some future accomplishment, you're trapped in the ego's game. You're trying to build a house on shifting sand, wondering why it never feels stable. The beautiful paradox is that the separate self, for all its struggles and suffering, is also the doorway to freedom. When you begin to see through its game, when you start to recognize the stories it tells as stories rather than truth, something magical happens. You don't destroy the ego, you simply stop taking it so seriously. You realize that you can play the roles life requires without losing yourself in them. The return to presence isn't a journey to somewhere else. It's a recognition of where you already are. It's like spending years searching for your glasses while they're sitting on your head. The moment you stop looking and simply notice, there they are. Presence isn't something you achieve or attain. It's something you stop avoiding. Most of us live in a state of chronic distraction. We're either rehashing the past, replaying conversations, analyzing mistakes, clinging to memories, or we're rehearsing the future, planning, worrying, fantasizing about what might happen. The present moment becomes a brief stopover between these two more compelling destinations. We treat now as if it's the waiting room for real life, when in fact, it's the only room where real life ever happens. The gentle return to presence begins with a simple question. What is here right now? Not what should be here, not what you wish were here, not what you're afraid might be here tomorrow. Just what is actually here in this moment, without any story about whether it's good or bad, right or wrong. You might notice the feeling of your feet on the ground, the rhythm of your breathing, the temperature of the air on your skin. But you might become aware of sounds you hadn't noticed, the hum of electricity, the distant murmur of traffic, the beating of your own heart. These aren't meditation techniques. They're simply ways of coming back to the direct experience of being alive. In presence, something remarkable happens. The commentary that usually runs like background music in your mind begins to quiet. The voice that's always evaluating, comparing, planning, and worrying takes a rest. In the space that opens up, you might notice a quality of aliveness that has nothing to do with what you're doing or thinking. It's just pure awareness, aware of itself. This awareness doesn't belong to you, you belong to it. It's not something you possess, it's something you are. When you rest in presence, you're not becoming more spiritual or more enlightened. You're simply returning to your natural state, the way water returns to being wet when you stop trying to make it dry. The mind often resists this return to presence because it seems too simple, too ordinary. The ego wants enlightenment to be special, dramatic, something that sets you apart from others, but presence is utterly ordinary. It's available to everyone all the time without any special qualifications or achievements. You don't need to be a meditator or a mystic. You don't need to have read the right books or studied with the right teachers. You just need to stop running from this moment long enough to recognize that you're already here. In presence, you begin to see that the person you thought you were, the one with all the problems and achievements, the history and the plans, is like a cloud passing through the sky of your awareness. The cloud is real, but it's not who you are. You are the sky itself, vast and unchanging, allowing all weather to pass through without being disturbed by any of it. This recognition doesn't solve all your problems or make you immune to life's challenges. You still have responsibilities, relationships, and difficulties to navigate. But you navigate them from a different place, not as someone desperately trying to fix and control everything, but as consciousness itself, playing in the field of experience with curiosity and love. Love is not what we've been taught to believe it is. We've been conditioned to think of love as a transaction, something we give in order to get something back. We love conditionally, with strings attached, with expectations and demands. I love you if you behave this way, if you meet my needs, if you don't disappoint me. But this isn't love at all. This is need dressed up in love's clothing. True love has no agenda. It doesn't want to change you or fix you or make you into something you're not. It simply sees you as you are and says, yes, this is perfect. Not perfect in the sense that there's nothing to grow or learn, but perfect in the sense that this moment, this expression of life, is exactly what it needs to be right now. When you begin to love yourself unconditionally, something extraordinary happens. You stop trying to be someone else. You stop apologizing for your existence. You stop seeking validation from the outside world because you've found an inexhaustible source of acceptance within. This doesn't make you selfish or narcissistic, quite the opposite. When you're not desperately trying to fill the void inside with other people's approval, you have something genuine to offer. Most of us carry a harsh inner critic that never stops talking. It tells us we're not good enough, not smart enough, not spiritual enough. It compares us to others and finds us lacking. It remembers every mistake and predicts every failure. We would never speak to a friend the way we speak to ourselves, yet we consider this internal abuse normal, even motivating. Love asks a different question. What would it be like to be as kind to yourself as you are to your dearest friend? What would change if you treated your own heart with the same tenderness you show to a crying child? What would be possible if you could look at your struggles and imperfections with compassion rather than judgment? This doesn't mean becoming complacent or avoiding growth. Love isn't passive acceptance of harmful patterns. True love wants the best for you, which sometimes means having difficult conversations with yourself about what needs to change. But it approaches these conversations from a place of care rather than criticism, understanding rather than attack. When you learn to love yourself as you are, you naturally begin to love others as they are. You stop trying to change them, fix them, or make them into your image of what they should be. You see their struggles as your own struggles, their pain as your own pain. You recognize that we're all walking each other home, all trying to figure out how to be human in a complicated world. Love becomes the lens through which you see everything. The person who cuts you off in traffic isn't an enemy. They're someone having a hard day. The difficult colleague isn't a problem to be solved. They're a fellow human being carrying their own invisible burdens. The family member who pushes your buttons isn't doing it to torment you. They're operating from their own wounds and fears. This shift in perception is the ultimate teaching. Love shows you that separation is an illusion, that the boundaries between self and other are far more fluid than the mind believes. When you truly love, you discover that there's no real difference between loving yourself and loving others. There's just love flowing through you, expressing itself in countless ways. The art of letting go isn't about giving up or becoming passive. It's about recognizing the futility of trying to control what was never in your control in the first place. We spend enormous amounts of energy trying to orchestrate outcomes, manage other people's opinions, and force life to match our expectations. But life has its own intelligence, its own rhythm, its own way of unfolding that rarely matches our plans. Think about how tightly you grip the steering wheel when you're learning to drive. Every muscle is tense, every movement deliberate and forced. But as you become more skilled, you learn to hold the wheel lightly, to work with the car rather than against it. The same principle applies to life. The more you try to control everything, the more out of control you feel. The more you can relax into the flow of existence, the more gracefully you move through it. Letting go begins with recognizing what's actually yours to manage. You can choose your thoughts, your words, your actions. You can decide how to respond to what life brings you. But you can't control the weather, other people's choices, the economy, or the timing of events. You can't even control your own body completely. Your heart beats without your permission. Your hair grows without your supervision. Your cells regenerate without your conscious direction. Most of our suffering comes from trying to control what's uncontrollable. We waste precious energy fighting reality, arguing with what is, demanding that life be different than it is. We hold on to relationships that have ended, jobs that no longer serve us, versions of ourselves that we've outgrown. We cling to youth when we're aging, to certainty when everything is uncertain, to permanence when everything is constantly changing. The sacred art of letting go doesn't mean you stop caring or stop trying. It means you stop attaching your peace of mind to specific outcomes. You do your best, you plant seeds, you show up fully, and then you release the results to something larger than your personal will. You trust that life knows what it's doing, even when you can't see the bigger picture. This trust isn't naive optimism. It's a recognition that the intelligence that orchestrates the movement of planets and the growth of flowers is the same intelligence that's orchestrating your life. You don't have to figure everything out. You don't have to have all the answers. You just have to show up with an open heart and see what wants to emerge. When you let go of needing to be right, you can finally learn. When you let go of needing to be in control, you can receive help. When you let go of needing to be perfect, you can be authentic. When you let go of needing to be someone special, you can discover the extraordinary, ordinary person you've always been. The practice of letting go is ongoing. The mind will always want to grab hold of something, a plan, a belief, an identity, a relationship. But each time you notice this grasping and gently release it, you create space for something new to enter. You become like a tree that bends with the wind instead of breaking against it. No one signs up for suffering, yet it visits every life without exception. We lose people we love, face illnesses we don't deserve, watch dreams crumble despite our best efforts. The natural response is to fight against this pain, to see it as a mistake, a punishment, or evidence that something is fundamentally wrong with us or the world. But what if suffering isn't the enemy we've been taught to believe it is? What if it's actually one of our most profound teachers, offering lessons that joy and comfort never could? This doesn't mean we should seek out pain or romanticize trauma. It means we can learn to work with the difficulties that inevitably arise, transforming them from obstacles into opportunities for growth. Suffering cracks us open. It breaks down the walls we've built around our hearts, the facades we've constructed to protect ourselves from vulnerability. When we're in pain, we can't pretend everything is fine. We can't maintain the illusion that we're in control, that we're separate from the fragility of human existence. In this breaking open, something beautiful can emerge: compassion, wisdom, a deeper connection to life itself. The heart that has been broken knows how to hold space for other broken hearts. The person who has faced their own mortality can sit with others who are dying without trying to fix or change anything. The one who has walked through depression can recognize the signs in others and offer the gift of understanding. Our wounds become our credentials for helping others heal. This doesn't happen automatically. Pain alone doesn't create wisdom. It's how we work with the pain that transforms it into grace. We can become bitter and closed, using our suffering as evidence that life is cruel and people are untrustworthy. Or we can allow it to soften us, to reveal the tender humanity we share with everyone who has ever felt broken. The difference lies in how we relate to the experience. When we fight against suffering, it hardens us. When we try to escape it through addiction, distraction, or denial, it follows us like a shadow. But when we turn toward it with curiosity and compassion, when we ask, "What is this here to teach me?" something shifts. The pain doesn't necessarily disappear, but it transforms from meaningless agony into purposeful challenge. Sometimes the teaching is about surrender, learning to let go of how we thought life should be and accepting what it actually is. Sometimes it's about courage, discovering strength we didn't know we had. Sometimes it's about connection, realizing we're not alone in our struggles. Sometimes it's about presence, learning to be with what is without trying to change it. The mystics throughout history have understood this paradox. They've seen that our deepest wounds often become our greatest gifts, that our most difficult experiences can become our most valuable teachings. The cross becomes the resurrection. The dark night of the soul becomes the dawn of awakening. The descent into hell becomes the ascent to heaven. This isn't spiritual bypassing, pretending that everything is fine when it's not, or trying to think positive thoughts to make pain disappear. It's a deeper recognition that life includes both joy and sorrow, both creation and destruction, both coming together and falling apart. When we can hold this paradox without needing to resolve it, we discover a peace that doesn't depend on circumstances. The path of service isn't about becoming a saint or sacrificing yourself for others. It's about recognizing that serving others is ultimately serving yourself. Because at the deepest level, there is no separation between you and the people you're helping. When you feed the hungry, you're feeding your own soul. When you comfort the grieving, you're healing your own heart. When you offer presence to someone in pain, you're discovering your own capacity for love. Service begins with seeing clearly. Most of us walk through the world focused on our own concerns, our own agenda, our own problems. We're so busy managing our internal weather that we barely notice the storms others are weathering. But when you begin to truly see the people around you, not as obstacles to your happiness or tools for your success, but as fellow beings struggling with the same fundamental questions you are, something opens up. You start to notice the checkout clerk who looks tired, the neighbor who seems lonely, the colleague who's trying to hold it together after a difficult divorce. You see that everyone is carrying invisible burdens, fighting battles you know nothing about, trying to make sense of a life that often feels confusing and overwhelming. This seeing naturally gives rise to compassion, and compassion naturally expresses itself as service. True service isn't about fixing people or solving their problems. It's about showing up with presence and love, offering what you have to give without attachment to the outcome. Sometimes this means taking action, volunteering at a shelter, helping a friend move, listening to someone who needs to talk. Sometimes it means simply holding space, being fully present with someone in their pain or joy without trying to change anything. The ego often co-opts service, turning it into another way to feel special or superior. Look how good I am, how much I'm helping others. But real service is anonymous, humble, unconcerned with recognition or reward. It flows naturally from a heart that has recognized its connection to all life. You don't serve others because you should or because it will make you look good. You serve because you can't help it, because the boundaries between self and other have become so thin that helping others feels like helping yourself. This doesn't mean becoming a doormat or sacrificing your own well-being for others. Healthy service includes caring for yourself, setting boundaries, and recognizing your own needs. You can't pour from an empty cup, but when you're serving from a place of genuine love rather than duty or guilt, you often find that giving energy actually creates more energy. You discover that you have more to offer than you thought. Service also teaches you about interconnectedness in a way that no philosophy or spiritual practice can. When you're volunteering at a homeless shelter, you realize how thin the line is between having a home and losing one. When you're caring for someone with dementia, you're confronted with the fragility of memory and identity. When you're working with children, you remember the innocence and wonder that still exists within you. Through service, you begin to understand that we're all walking each other home. We're all trying to figure out how to be human, how to love, how to face difficulty with grace. The person you're serving today might be the one who serves you tomorrow. The help you offer comes back to you in unexpected ways through unexpected people at unexpected times. Service becomes a mirror reflects, adding back to you your own capacity for love, your own strength, your own ability to make a difference. You discover that you don't need to be perfect or have all the answers to be helpful. You just need to show up with an open heart and see what wants to happen. In serving others, you serve the best part of yourself. In helping others remember their worth, you remember your own. When you truly understand that death is not the opposite of life, but its completion, everything changes. We spend so much energy trying to avoid the inevitable, fighting against the very process that gives life its preciousness. We accumulate possessions as if we could take them with us, build monuments to our ego as if they could make us immortal, cling to youth as if aging were a disease rather than a natural progression. But death is not a thief in the night stealing what belongs to us. It's a teacher, perhaps the most profound teacher we'll ever encounter. It whispers constantly, "This is temporary, this is precious, this matters because it won't last forever." When you really listen to this whisper, you stop postponing love, stop waiting for the perfect moment to be kind, stop saving your best self for some future occasion. The contemplation of death isn't morbid, it's liberating. When you realize that your time here is limited, that this body is on loan, that this personality is a temporary costume, you begin to hold everything more lightly. The promotion you didn't get, the relationship that ended, the mistake you made last week, all of it becomes less solid, less permanent, less capable of defining who you are. This doesn't mean becoming careless or nihilistic. It means recognizing that since everything is temporary, everything is precious. The morning coffee tastes richer when you know you won't be drinking it forever. The conversation with your friend becomes more meaningful when you remember that neither of you will be here indefinitely. The sunset is more beautiful because you know it will fade. Death also teaches us about letting go in the most ultimate way. We practice letting go throughout our lives, releasing old versions of ourselves, old relationships, old ways of being. But death is the final letting go, the complete release of everything we've identified with. When you contemplate this honestly, you begin to see how much energy you waste trying to hold on to things that are already flowing away. The fear of death is really the fear of not having lived fully. It's the regret of all the love we didn't express, all the risks we didn't take, all the moments we spent distracted or numb. When you befriend death, you befriend life. You stop sleepwalking through your days and start showing up fully to whatever is happening right now. Caring for those who are dying, sitting with grief, facing your own mortality, these experiences crack open the heart in ways that nothing else can. They strip away the superficial concerns that usually occupy our minds and reveal what really matters. In the presence of death, the ego's games become transparent. What remains is love, connection, and the simple miracle of consciousness itself. The dying often be peaceful, Our teachers, showing us how to let go with grace, how to find peace in the midst of great change, how to love without conditions. They remind us that we are not these bodies, not these personalities, not these stories we've been telling ourselves. We are something much more essential, something that cannot be destroyed by the dissolution of form. In a world that demands expertise, that rewards those who have answers and solutions, there is profound wisdom in not knowing. The mind wants to figure everything out, to create neat categories and clear explanations for the mystery of existence. But the more you truly understand about life, the more you realize how little you actually know. This isn't ignorance, it's wisdom. It's the recognition that reality is far more complex, mysterious, and wonderful than any concept can capture. The moment you think you have life figured out, you've stopped growing. The moment you believe you understand another person completely, you've stopped seeing them. The moment you're certain about what God is or isn't, you've closed the door to mystery. Beginner's mind is not about being naive or rejecting knowledge. It's about approaching each moment with fresh eyes, as if you're encountering it for the first time.